Okay, let's unpack this. Buy now, pay later. You've probably seen it online, right? Maybe for stuff you didn't really need.
Right, those impulse buys.
Exactly. But here's where it gets, well, really interesting. We're seeing it pop up more and more at the grocery checkout.
Groceries, like your weekly shop.
Yeah. Splitting the cost of milk and bread into installments. Is this just, how we pay now, or is something else going on here?
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is this apparent shift, how people are using these BNPL services.
Mm.
It's moving past those, like, treat yourself things
Right.
and into everyday essentials. For anyone who isn't totally familiar, buy now, pay later, it basically breaks your purchase into smaller payments, usually interest-free, short-term.
Gotcha.
So today, we're really diving deep into this trend, BNPL for groceries.
Mm.
We want to understand, what's the data saying, and explore the different takes on it. Is it helpful, or is it maybe a sign of deeper economic stress?
Absolutely. And we've been looking at some data from the Snuffington Press, and it paints a pretty clear picture of this shift.
Okay. What did they find?
They found a quarter, 25% of all BNPL users are now using these services for groceries.
A quarter.
Yeah. And here's a number that really stood out to me.
Mm.
Late payments, they're up significantly. Went from 34% to 41% in just the last year.
Oof. That's a big jump.
It is. And interestingly, it's not just hitting, folks you might traditionally think are struggling. Even people with higher incomes are apparently falling behind.
Hmm. So it's widespread.
Seems like it. And leading the charge.
Yeah.
Younger Americans, Gen Z, millennials, over half of them are using BNPL for food.
54%, wasn't it?
That's the number. So let's really get into it. Is this just a smart way to handle, say, fluctuating grocery prices? Or does it point to something more systemic?
Well, I think there's definitely an argument for BNPL being a useful tool for
Yeah.
managing short-term cash flow, maybe, especially with food prices being so uh, up and down.
Right, like if you have a big shop one week.
Exactly. Imagine someone on, say, a fixed income. They get hit with a huge grocery bill right after paying rent. Spreading that cost out could feel, well, more manageable than maybe an overdraft fee or missing another payment.
Okay, I can see that.
And we can't just dismiss the convenience,
Uh,
especially for younger people. They're used to these seamless digital payments for like everything else.
True. It's how things are done now.
Yeah. And the Snuffington Press piece even mentioned BNPL having potential to empower people if it's used wisely, of course.
That's a fair point. That flexibility, breaking down a bigger bill into smaller bits, it definitely has appeal. And for a generation, like you said, that grew up financing phones and subscriptions, this might just feel normal, right?
It might, a natural extension.
Plus, maybe it's seen as better than high-interest credit cards for these smaller, regular buys.
That could be part of the calculation for some people, sure, avoiding that immediate credit card interest.
Okay, when we see that big jump in late payments, even among higher earners, doesn't that suggest it's maybe not just about convenience anymore?
And that's where the cautious view comes in. I think the Snuffington Press put it very clearly. This growing reliance on BNPL for essentials like food,
Yeah.
it could signal real underlying economic strain.
A quiet crisis, they called it.
Exactly, a quiet crisis and the growing fragility of the American economy. That language really hits home when you think about people financing, dinner.
Hmm.
And they pose that question. What happens when borrowing $40 for groceries feels as normal as grabbing a coffee? That really gets at the risk, doesn't it? Normalizing debt just to survive.
It really does. It feels different.
Mhm.
Using BNPL for, I don't know, a new pair of shoes versus using it to put food on the table. There's a fundamental difference there.
Absolutely.
And that other stat, nearly a quarter of users have 3 or more BNPL loans active at once. That's also worrying.
Very. It's easy to see how those small payments, maybe across different apps, could suddenly stack up and become, well, overwhelming.
Yeah, a debt spiral waiting to happen.
Especially since the legal protections often aren't as strong as for traditional credit cards, right?
Yeah.
Fewer safeguards if you fall behind.
Right, less protection.
So, yeah, we might be looking at a situation where the easy access, the low barrier to entry for these small loans,
Yeah.
it might actually be hiding a bigger problem.
Like a Band-Aid on a deeper wound?
Sort of. The Snuffington Press used the term economic mirage. BNPL creates this, like, temporary illusion of affordability. It lets people cope, maybe, but it delays facing the real issues. Rising food costs, wages not keeping up, housing, all that stuff.
So you're just treating the symptom, not the cause.
Pretty much.
Okay. So yeah, there's the appeal, flexibility, convenience, especially for digital natives. But the data on late payments, the use for essentials, That paints a much more concerning picture. Potential vulnerability. Feels like we're at a fork in the road.
But, the article also pointed to some hopeful signs. It wasn't all doom and gloom.
Like what?
Well, there's more talk now about regulating the BNPL industry. Better consumer protection, more transparency. That could help people make smarter choices. Empower them, like we said earlier.
Okay, regulation could help.
And we're seeing some grassroots things, too, like community discount programs, even experiments with no-interest microloans right at the grocery store level, local solutions.
Ah, interesting. Direct help.
Yeah. And also a bigger push for financial literacy, especially for younger people, helping them understand the real costs and risks involved with BNPL.
Those community efforts sound really positive. Tackling the problem at the source almost. Offering actual support, not just another payment plan.
Exactly.
And I agree, financial literacy is huge. If people really get the terms, the potential downsides, they can decide if BNPL is a helpful tool for them or if it's maybe a trap they should avoid.
It brings us back to that idea, doesn't it? Making sure basic needs aren't treated like, well, like luxuries you need financing for.
Right, but how scalable are those local programs? Can they really make a dent when the economic pressures are so widespread? That's the concern, I suppose.
That's the cautious counterpoint, absolutely. These initiatives are great, they're valuable, but can they match the scale of the problem? Maybe not on their own.
And regulation. Well, that often moves slowly, doesn't it? Financial tech evolves so fast. Will the rules catch up in time?
That's always the risk. Adoption is rapid, regulation lags behind, and the Snuffington Press kind of brings it back down to earth, reminding us that, quote, financing your groceries isn't innovation, it's a quiet cry for help.
Oof. Yeah, that hits hard.
It underscores that point, right? Payment solutions might offer temporary relief, but they don't fix the root causes why people are struggling to afford groceries in the first place.
Exactly. It feels really important to separate a temporary fix from a real, sustainable solution. BNPL might ease the immediate pressure, but it doesn't address rising costs or stagnant wages.
Not at all.
And that other point the Snuffington Press raised about the dignity of survival. Does relying on financing for food, does that uphold our dignity? Or does it kind of chip away at it, making a basic necessity feel conditional?
It's a profound question. It seems pretty clear that both things are driving this trend.
Yeah.
The convenience is real, the digital integration is real, but so are the underlying economic pressures. It's not just people choosing this for fun.
No, it seems like for many it's becoming a necessity, a response to tight budgets.
And while, yes, the talk about regulation and community programs offers some hope, that Snuffington Press, quote, really sticks, hope isn't in another payment plan, it's in building a world where you don't need one just to survive.
Yeah, I think we can definitely agree on that sentiment. That's the goal, isn't it?
That's the ultimate goal.
And, just the fact that there's data out there that we're having these conversations feels like a really important first step, understanding what's happening.
Absolutely. Awareness is key. So, wrapping up this deep dive, the core tension really is this double-edged sword, isn't it? BNPL for groceries offers that immediate convenience, that flexibility.
Yeah.
But its growing use, especially for essentials, sends this potentially worrying signal about economic precarity, about debt becoming normalized just for day-to-day living.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Next time you're at the checkout, maybe you notice those BNPL logos more. Makes you wonder about the bigger picture, the forces shaping how we all manage just getting by.
Yeah. And maybe final thought to leave you with, building on that. If a quarter of BNPL users are now financing food, what other parts of our economy, things that seem stable on the surface, might actually be more fragile than we realize? Maybe it's time to look past the immediate ease of these payment tools and really consider the systemic implications. What does it all mean?